Peace and blessings, family. This is Oubria. Thank you for coming back to my channel. I have a early morning message for y'all, and it may not be early morning where you are, but the vibe that I have going on in here is definitely early morning because that's what time it is for me when I'm recording this message. But this message has actually been on my heart for like a week now, and I needed to take notes so that I could explain it in a way that was articulate and cohesive. So it took me a while to put it together, but I think I got it. Okay. So what I want to talk to y'all about today, and I'm going to use references from the Bible and pop culture because that's how I like to get down. But I wanted to talk to y'all today about the responsibility of the ones who are called to break generational curses. Because a lot of times we know that we're the one in our family who is, or in our bloodline. It could be a spiritual family if it's not like actual blood. But you just know that you're the first person in a certain lineage to break a curse. And a lot of times it's almost like how people spend so many years planning the wedding that they don't think about the actual marriage. And so I just want to press upon us this sense of responsibility about what comes next in terms of the blessing that we are given as far as breaking that generational curse. And the first example that I want to use to kind of explain what I'm talking about is King David. And y'all know I love to use King David as an example. But for those of you who don't know, and I encourage you to read your own Bible and look it up for yourself. But for those of you who don't know, King David is little David who fought Goliath. Okay. The reason that he was put into the position that he was put into is because Israel had asked, because for a long time the people of Israel did not have a king, and then they asked for a king, and the king that they got was King Samuel, and God was not pleased with Samuel. No, I'm sorry, forgive me, Samuel was a prophet. The king that they got was King Saul. So Samuel anointed Saul to be king, and then God was not pleased with Saul as king, so he told Samuel, I've chosen someone else to be king. The person that he chose was David, but David was a child at the time. So David had to grow into the role that God had chosen for him. So in a lot of ways, even though David had a father on earth, truly the Most High was his father. And Jesus does come in the spiritual lineage of David. Although not the blood lineage, which I've discussed in another video. And that's just my opinion. Like I said, look it up for yourself. My point is that in a lot of ways, God raised David. And you could look at it like David had a really hard life, which he did. I mean, first he fought Goliath. Then he went to work for... David was just wild is what I'm trying to say. Like, he was like a fruit and berry picking, cave sleeping, outdoor camping. He had a notorious temper. He wasn't afraid of anything. He low-key reminded me of Samson, just without the strength, but he just had that cockiness that someone walks with when they know that God got their back, right? So he went from beating up Goliath, then he lived in the temple with Saul, and then Saul started to get jealous of him because David was starting to get fame, so Saul liked clout, right? David was not a clout chaser, but Saul looked at David's fame as clout and got jealous and started hating on him. So then he wanted to kill him. So then David spent like 20 years on the run from basically his boss, which is crazy. It's like your supervisor has picked you as a replacement to replace your manager, and then your manager tries to kill you for 20 years until it's time for him to retire. So David had a really hard time, just fighting a lot of battles, but he did not have a lot of comfort for a long time in his life. Unbeknownst to him, though, that was his training. So there is a point in the Bible where it says, blessed is the man whom the Lord corrects, so do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. In other words, if you are in a position where you just seem like you can't catch a break, sometimes what that really is just the hand of God on your life, because God has a purpose for you that's beyond what you see for yourself. And God just refuses to let you mess that up. So, it could be like, how come Jimmy steals all the time and nothing happens to Jimmy, and I steal once and I got to go to jail for 6 months? It's because your ass ain't supposed to be out here stealing, because God has a different plan for you than he has for Jimmy. See what I'm saying? So God had a certain plan for David. And in a lot of ways, spiritually, David was breaking a lot of generational curses of the Israelites. I mean, you know, just in terms of Saul being king, he wanted a lot of glory for himself. In fact, the day that God was like, I'm through with him and I'm going to choose David to be king, Samuel couldn't even find Saul to tell Saul that God was displeased with him, because this fool was out here building a monument to himself. He went to some other city to build a statue to himself. You see what I'm saying? And stuff like that. Like, the Israelites always had a problem with idolatry and getting just mixed up in other people's cultures and religions, and like not attributing things to the Most High God. And that could be because they spent so much time in Egypt, just absorbing different people's practices. It is what it is, but that was something that God wanted to break. So God's relationship with David was so close. It was so close to the fact that David wrote most of the book of Psalms, which is basically praises and lamentations to the Most High. But it's just like a book of faith and gratitude, because that's how it's like love letters to God. Because that's how close that they were. Now, you cannot develop a relationship that close with the Most High if you are not put in situations that test your faith. And when your faith is tested, you make the choice to leave it in God's hands instead of taking it into your own hands. So that was David, right? And there was a few places where David kind of almost got on track, but God like sent someone to correct him, or just spoke to his spirit so that he did not do the wrong thing. The examples that I have here is, number one, there was a time where Saul was chasing David and he had almost caught him. He was like looking for him to kill him, and he was standing in this one place looking for him, and David was hiding, and he was so close to Saul that he could have came up behind Saul and killed him himself. But he didn't. He just cut off a little piece of Saul's robe at the bottom and then sent it to him the next day, as if to say, this is how close I was to your ass. I could have killed you if I wanted to, but I didn't. So like, please stop. Let's stop this. I don't have anything against you. But you see what I'm saying? There was an instance where David could have did the wrong thing and God didn't let him. There's also a few instances where like he would go out to battle with people, and he would always know that God was going to give him the victory. So if God did not give them the victory, then he would go and repent. And one time God was like, no, I didn't let y'all win that battle because there's people in your camp that have idols, that have false idols that they took from the people that they pillaged, and they hid them. So then David had to call out all these soldiers and be like, who is it? He had to like root out that weakness or whatever. And my favorite story of David, okay, my favorite story of him, bro. So this is during the time where he had been living in the wilderness, right? And there was this dude, Nabal, and this cat was really rich, and he had a lot of sheep. And it was the time of season. It was the time for him to shear his sheep and have like extra wool and have a feast and stuff like that. So David sent a couple of messengers to Nabal, and he said, please go, like, find the dude who's shearing sheep because he has extra, and tell him that when his sheep herders were out in the wilderness, tell him, like, remind him that we protected them, that we protected his property, and we didn't let any harm come to them at all. And ask them if they could just, like, anything that they have to spare to feed us, let them, ask him, can he spare it? So David's men went to dude and asked him, reminded him like, yo, we did y'all a solid. I looked out for your people. If y'all have anything to spare during your season of abundance, please give it to us. And this cat was like, I don't know you. I don't know why y'all out here in the wilderness. I don't know why y'all not, aren't you supposed to be in the kingdom with Samuel? Like, he just like read them for filth. He was very disrespectful. So, and he told them no. So when David's men got back to him, David was like, "Oh, pick up y'all swords. We finna kill everybody." So they were about to go to Nabal's town or household or whatever and kill everybody there. These were hungry, tired, loyal soldiers and servants of God who had been dissed, and they didn't give a freak, okay? And so they was about to just shed blood. Like, if we can't, if you're not gonna feed us, then we're gonna kill you and eat everything you got. You know what I mean? So word got back to Nabal's wife, or Nabal's wife. I don't know why I can't pronounce this man's name. I'm just gonna pick a pronunciation. I'm gonna call him Nabal. Okay, we're gonna settle on that. So word got back to Nabal's wife. Her name was Abigail. That her dumbass husband had disrespected soon-to-be King David. Okay, and that he was coming to kill everybody. Hide your wife, hide your kids. So she was a very wise woman. So she got together a bunch of food, that like a bunch of lambs that she had already prepared. She made like 200 raisin cakes. She got 2 bottles of wine. She had some grain, and she loaded up some donkeys with all this food and went out to meet David before he came to her household to kill her and her dumbass husband and everybody else. And when she reached David, she got down on her knees and she said, "Look, please accept this food. First of all, my husband's name is Nabal. That means foolish man." I don't know if that's true or if she was just being silly, but that's what she said. She said, "My husband's name literally translates to foolish man. Man, don't listen to him. We appreciate everything that you did for our shepherds. They told us that you were like a wall of protection around them day and night. We appreciate that. Here is some food." But then she spoke life into him and she said, you know, one day you are going to be king, you know, and I know that you're having a hard time right now, but one day you are going to be king. One day you are going to be out of this difficult situation. And when you are, you don't want to have any guilt on your head. You don't want to look back and think that you kill all these people because you were hungry or because somebody slighted you. What's going to happen is that God is always going to deliver your enemies into your hands. You are never going to have to go out and avenge anything yourself. Because you know God don't want that guilt on your head. And God was like, wow, or David was like, "Wow, Lord, like thank you so much for sending me such a wise spiritual woman to speak life into me at this time when I really, really needed it." So you know, they ate the food, everything was all good, and then she went back to her husband, and when she got back to the crib, this dude was feasting, he was drunk. And so, you know, she let him sleep it off. And the next morning she told him what happened and how he'd almost got everybody killed by just being selfish and short-sighted. And he turned to like stone. Like over 10 days, he just turned to stone and died, basically. Like he was just in shock at the fact that he had almost cost everybody in his household their life based on his just being flippant, you know, like flip at the mouth. And when he died, David sent for Abigail and was like, "Hey, yo, be my wife." So she went off with David as his wife. She was like his second or third wife. Now, so this, I'm just saying, like, these are ways that God like would step in and correct David. Okay, so if you're the person in your family who is the one who's supposed to break a generational curse, number one, you're probably going to be experiencing the worst of the curse because you're the one to break it. So, because how are you supposed to break a curse if you don't experience it, right? So say if you're supposed to break a generational curse in your family of drug addiction, you would probably be the one with the worst addiction. But then you're the one to kick it, you know, and then the people after you don't have that issue. Or if you're the one in your family who's supposed to break like the curse of being a single mom, you're probably going to be the one with the most kids. You see what I'm saying? If you're the one in your family who's supposed to break the curse of being a teen mother, you're probably going to be the one who has the baby at the youngest age. And stuff like that. So yeah, so like I said, okay, let me see where I'm at. Okay. So that's David's story, right? He broke all these curses. He broke the curse of poverty because David once he became king, he was rich AF. But he came from a poor family. Remember, he was the one of like, he was the little brother out of like 6 or 7 brothers. They didn't have a lot of money. They were in service to Saul. He broke the curse of being rebellious against God, which is like a spiritual curse. with the Israelites. They was always doing some stuff that they weren't supposed to be doing, but David was very obedient. And that's why he wrote the book of Psalms. Like, it's one of the most famous books of the Bible. People read the book of Psalms even if they don't read the Bible. That's how powerful David's testimony is. So he also broke the curse of faithlessness and just, moving on your own understanding as opposed to moving on the Most High's understanding. David also, before making a lot of major decisions, he would consult, in the Bible, it's called the ephod, which was a breastplate that the priest would wear, and it had precious stones in it. It had stones to represent each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they would use it as like discernment for God's will. So David was out here doing divination, but not conjuring spirits and dead people and stuff like that. He was really just being like, Lord, speak to me through whatever. Okay. Like my mama used to say, there's a part in the Bible where God made an ass talk. He made a donkey talk. So once you know that God can speak to you through everything, like, you always listen for God's voice. So David broke the curse of like going to false idols or other gods or whatever when he was in a hard spot. He never forsake the Most High's direction. Okay. So he broke a bunch of curses. However, whenever you're the one in your family who's going to break one generational curse, like how the Bible says, whenever you sweep out one evil spirit, 7 more are going to come to try to take its place. Once you break one generational curse, you have to know that you're going to be at the mercy of another curse that you didn't even see coming. So David had a bit of hypersexuality going on. He had, I want to say, like 30 wives, and he was just randy. You know what I mean? He was hot. So once he became king, there's this famous story about David and this chick, Bathsheba, where he was on his roof. This was when he was king, so he's not in any difficult situations anymore. Not, at least not like how he was. Like they say, new levels, new devils. He definitely had new responsibilities, more money, no more problems, stuff like that. But the level of comfort that he had lived without for so many years was gone. So he was definitely more relaxed and probably not going to God about every little thing, right? That's actually a quote from the movie Casino. He stopped asking for permission back home about every little thing. I need to write that down. But that's a side note. Okay. So, David saw this chick. He was on his roof, and he saw this chick on the roof across from his, Bathsheba, and true to her name, she was taking a bath on the roof, and he was very aroused by her. So he sent for her, and he laid with her. Now, he was not supposed to be sleeping with Bathsheba. She was the wife of one of his generals in his army who was out at war at the time. Mind you, David, he used to always be out at war with his soldiers, but now that he was king, he didn't have to actually go fight the battles for himself, right? Because he's in more of a position of comfort. So he slept with Bathsheba, wasn't supposed to do that. She got pregnant, and then David was like, oh, shit. So he did not want people to know that he had impregnated Bathsheba. So what he did was he called her husband home from the war front and pretended like he was giving him a vacation and was like, why don't you go home, relax, sleep with your wife, enjoy yourself. Because he wanted dude to sleep with his wife, so then when she showed up pregnant, the dude would think that it was his baby, right? Well, the guy was really loyal. He was a soldier like how David used to be. You feel me? So the dude was like, nah, I'm not going to sleep with my wife because my loyalty right now is with my soldiers out in the field, and I'm not going to do anything that they can't do. My heart is with them. So thank you for the, for the invitation, but I can't do that right now. I'm kind of in solidarity to these men right now. So David was like, oh, hell, like I can't even pass this baby off as this guy's baby. So what did he do? He had him purposely positioned in the front line in the military so that he would be killed. So he had somebody killed to cover up a lie because of his sin, which was very unlike David's character. But you see what I'm saying? It's like, or maybe it's a revelation of a part of his character. Because just because God will choose you and anoint you to break a generational curse, it does not mean that you're perfect or that the devil won't try to get to you through other ways. Okay. So, David had dude killed, and then old girl had the baby. But because God was really, really mad about how this whole thing had went down, the baby got sick and died after like 10 days. And David was extremely sad and extremely repentant. And I mean, he just, I think he fasted like the whole time the baby was sick. He was just weak with guilt and apologetic. And he just begged for God's forgiveness. And like the Bible says, like if you repent, God will forgive you. God will forget your sin, but you're just supposed to go forth and sin no more. So David married Bathsheba. Their baby died. God forgave him for what he did. And then guess what? Bathsheba got pregnant again. Who did she get pregnant with? King Solomon. Now David total had like 30 wives, but everybody knows that King Solomon is the wisest king in the Bible. But isn't it crazy that King Solomon was born through Bathsheba, who was one of David's worst mistakes? And that's what I mean. It's like when you're going to break a generational curse, you're gonna be born into the worst of it, right? Because why wasn't the wisest king? Why wouldn't God pick one of David's other sons? Because he had a lot of kids. Why wouldn't God pick one of his other sons to be the king? It's because there is another generational curse that's supposed to be broken. And it's like God is kind of setting it up. Like God's not going to spoon feed you. At some point, you're supposed to grow in your maturity to kind of understand things for yourself. Even though you are a child of God, God is going to treat you like a grown-up. So, before this point, the Ark of the Covenant, which was the home of the Lord, it had always been carried, because the Israelites were just moving through the desert. And there was no like official temple built. And David really wanted to build God's temple. And God told him like, nah, your son's going to build the temple. You're not going to build it. Which I feel like is God's way of saying like your son needs to have his own relationship with me. Okay. You can't do it all. We've gone about as far as we're going to go with this. Like, you have to save some for the next generation. So Solomon did. God anointed Solomon to be king. He asked him, he came to him in a dream and he asked him what he wanted. And instead of asking for riches or honor or glory or any of that shit, true to being David's son, he just asked for wisdom. Solomon was a very humble man. But at the same time, it's like, if you're the son of a king, what else would you ask for? Because what could Solomon possibly want that he doesn't already have? He was raised in a palace. You see what I'm saying? So he asked for wisdom. And God gave it to him. And he said, because you've asked for wisdom, I'm also going to give you a lot of things that you didn't ask for because I'm so impressed with you at the fact that you asked for wisdom. Okay. The thing is, though, Solomon was wise, but he wasn't that smart just because he didn't have the experience that his father had. Now, this is what I mean about breaking a generational curse. God repeatedly told the Israelites, do not marry people from other religions because you're going to mess around and start worshiping their gods. Now remember, Solomon was born through David's sin of hypersexuality, okay? Of just being insatiable. Because why do you need 30 wives? Why do you need your friend's wife on the roof when you got 30 wives at home? That's just too much. That's an appetite that can't nobody fulfill, right? So since Solomon was born into that, you would think that, obviously he's the one who's supposed to break that particular curse, but he didn't. He fell subject to it. So whereas David had 30 wives, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. What? And that's just that part of like, just because you can, should you? Because that makes no sense. It's an embarrassment of riches, but it's not the good kind. It's the kind where you embarrass yourself. Okay. So Solomon built the Lord's temple. It was very ornate, but because he had 700 wives, a lot of those wives he took from foreign countries, and a lot of them had practices that God did not rock with. So there's rumors that he was out here sacrificing children to Moloch, like all the types of, building false, idols and statues and monuments, not because his heart was in it. He always worshiped the Most High God. He knew where his power and his instruction came from, but he was trying to make his wives happy. A lot of people mess up in life just trying to keep that hoe happy, bro. And that's what he was doing. So that kind of sent him on the wrong path. And it's like, that's when the devil's like, gotcha, gotcha. You see what I'm saying? So Solomon was in a perfect position to break that curse and be the wisest king, be a monogamous king, build God's temple, have a strong family, and have, a family line that continued the throne in Israel. But what happened was, he, maybe because his attention was so split, I don't know, because he had 700 wives, I don't think Solomon was able to instill the type of godliness in his sons that had been instilled in him. So then the son that he chose was all about the money and clout, and Israel did not respect him. So the son that was king after Solomon was Rehoboam. But 10 of the 12 tribes rejected him. So he was only king of 2 tribes. He was king of nothing. You see what I'm saying? It just kind of went up in smoke, and there was confusion, just like there had been before Saul. So you had King Saul, you had King David, then you had King Solomon, and then shit was all messed up again, and Israel didn't really have a strong leader after that. But my point about Solomon, what did I want to say about Solomon? Oh, is that low key that was David's fault? It's just the fault of, and this is what I want to say to y'all about breaking generational curses. Because Solomon was born into a life of luxury. So the relationship that David developed with the Most High came from a life of difficulty. It came from him knowing that God got his back, because there was a lot of times when nobody else had his back. And so, there was times where David was hungry and God fed him. There was times when David was, in danger and God protected him. Literally, David had to walk with the Lord. So that's why he had a personal relationship. However, Solomon didn't get that blessing of difficulty. It's like you low-key look back and realize those experiences that you think were so hard, they actually blessed you, because it gave you this strength and this knowing in your heart that nobody can take away from you. And then once you have so much more to give you to your children, you can't give them the one thing that means everything, which is faith, because they've never been in a position to need it. Do you see what I'm saying? So, this example actually kind of reminds me of Kanye West, because we all watch Kanye like rise to fame from just being a normal person, but just being a normal person who, he got into the accident, and he made the song Through the Wire. He made the song Jesus Walks. Like and then we see him go back to his faith now that he's older. But we saw Kanye, like, he has in his earlier songs just about how things weren't always easy, and the song that I'm thinking about actually is Drive Slow with Paul Wall, because I'm from Chicago. And so when he's talking about going up and down 79th Street and going to Ford City Mall and buying polos and being over there by, what high school? I think that's Leo High School. I just know that neighborhood very well. So when I listen to that song, I'm able to picture the exact streets that he's talking about. But he's talking about the fact that this older guy who is more in the game than he is, more wiser than him, is able to tell him, like, drive slow. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want everything to come at you too fast, because that's when the danger comes. Like, just enjoy being young, enjoy being broke, enjoy what you have while you have it, because with all these other things that you're reaching for, it's going to come all these other consequences with it that you're not necessarily ready for, right? If you haven't ever heard the song Drive Slow by Kanye West, go listen to it. Or maybe I'll put it in the comments, but or in the description box. But yeah, it's a good song. But yeah, so say Kanye has that friend from the song Drive Slow. Say that friend tells him, like, if you ever need anything, I got you. And say because Kanye did need certain things, he was able to go actually cash in that favor with that friend and be like, man, I need this, I need that. And so through that experience, he was able to see, like, that friend really is a loyal friend. I fucks with that friend. Well, that's kind of how God was to David. God would be like, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. And then David would actually have to go back to God and be like, yo, you sure? And God be like, I'm sure. I will deliver them into your hand. So David had to, like, cash in on those promises. And it was proven to him time and time again that God really had his back. Now, in the case of Kanye, his kids, right? North, Chicago, West, and Saint, that same person right, who mentored Kanye and told him, if you ever need anything, I got you. Of course, he would feel that same way towards Kanye's kids, you know, like, I love you, I love your kids. So he might see them once when they're little and be like, yo, I'm your Uncle Tito or whatever. And if you ever need me, I got you. But the problem with the kids is that they're rich. What the fuck are they ever going to need? You see what I'm saying? It's like, and then when they do need things, it may come with a feeling of shame because it's like, how dare I complain when I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth? It's similar to Jada Pinkett, right? Like, she comes from Baltimore, so she might have certain homies that she knows she can always rely on. But then Jaden and Willow, it's like they're not gonna they're just not they're not gonna have that same those same people. They might have those people. What I'm trying to say, those people might be available to them, but they're not going to reach for them the way that their parents did, which would strengthen the relationship. So that's the way it was with Solomon and the Most High. Because he was born rich in a palace, given a throne, given more riches than any other king, 700 wives, 300 concubines, he literally wanted for nothing. And then God, because of the promise that he made David, he didn't even rebuke him for none of the dumb shit he was doing. He just let him die. An old man with dignity and honor. The punishment was just, the kingdom ended after that. So it's like, you would, like, if God is punishing you or being hard on you, being stern with you, you need to understand that that is love. Okay. That is tough love, but it is love, because God is not trying to just keep you, but keep your generations going the way that they should go. But once you break the curse for yourself, it is then your responsibility to share your stories with your children, because they're not going to have the same hardships that you had. So they're not going to reach back to the Most High for this in the same reasons or ways that you did. So in that way, you have to be really transparent. And it might feel difficult or shameful to be transparent, because remember, whoever broke the curse would be the one to have the worst of the curse. You see what I'm saying? So in terms of Solomon being his father's son and having this insatiable appetite for women, that would mean that David would have to go to him and be like, don't be like me, because the way that you were born was because I had a man killed who was supposed to be your father. That's a very shameful story for David to have to tell Solomon. And I'm sure he did not tell him that story. And I'm sure maybe out of respect, people in the kingdom didn't really share that either, right? As far as everybody knew, Bathsheba was just one of David's wives. But Solomon probably needed to know, no, initially she was not my wife. Okay, I was lustful. I had to have her. I had everything, and I still had to have more. And you had a brother, and he died because of my sin, and you're our next kid. You think he told Solomon any of that? He probably did not. And a lot of us, our parents go through things, and then we're the ones to break these curses or fall victim to these curses. But it's because our parents don't tell us that the shit that they don't want us doing, that they did, and worse. Do you know what I mean? They're not transparent with us. And if they are, we're very blessed. So it's like we kind of have to suck up our pride. And this goes back to the Israelites with this thing with idolatry, always wanting something else to worship that's not God. A lot of times we want, like, if we break a generational curse and we're providing a life for our kids that's better than anything that we ever knew, then we want them to worship us. When we tell these stories, like, well, when I was your age, I had to walk 17 miles to school, and all you got to do is get in a lift. Or when I was your age, I had to, blah, blah, blah. Just all these, like, you should worship me type stories. You should look at me. You should look at everything that I've gone through, which is true. You should respect your parents. You should be respected for, the ways that you've come up, so that your children don't have it as hard as you had it. But what's the other part of the story, right? Why are you not telling your kids about the mistakes that you made when you were in those difficult situations, or the times that you compromised yourself, the times that you got the rent paid by sucking dick that you didn't want to suck, the times that you were out with friends that got peer pressured and put stuff up your nose that you don't want to put up your nose. Like, it's like, we have to keep it real, because our kids are not going to have to necessarily pray for the same things that we prayed for. They may not have to pray for rent money. They may not have to pray for food money, shoe money, you know, house note money, bus fare, all the things that we may have seen our parents struggle with, or things that we may struggle with, right? But they are going to have their own set of challenges and struggles that we can help them with if we help them develop a relationship with God. And the way that we do that is by showing them how many things God brought us through, right? We have to like be an open book or an open Bible to our children, and not be so caught up in wanting them to see us in a certain way that we unwittingly set them up for even worse things that we went through, you know, but just in a different way. So we don't want to be like passing these generational curses around like a collection plate. We want to be getting rid of these shits. Like, I got rid of this, we got rid of that, we got rid of that. And the way to do that is to just always be very open and transparent about your struggles, about your mistakes, okay? About the things that God has had to forgive you for. So then your kids can see that you were still forgiven and that you were still blessed, but that you are not perfect, so that they don't fall into this illusion of trying to live up to some example that you've fabricated, or just thinking that shit is not as hard as it really is, or thinking that God don't really be out here punishing people and snatching blessings like God do. Okay, because the reason why God walked with David so much is because he didn't want to have to do him like he did Saul and take the kingdom from him and embarrass him. I mean, Saul died falling on his own sword. Like, he died the most dishonorable death for a king. That's not what God wanted for David. So even if you have to like constantly humble yourself and confess your mistakes, that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because it means you're stamping out the enemy every time you do that. Because the enemy hides in our pride, or our stubbornness, our ego, our desire to look a certain way, you know. Bump that shit. So, yeah, that's just what I wanted to talk to y'all about. We got to keep it real. If we want these curses to stay broken, right? You have to be vigilant and be honest. That's the thing. Tell the truth. Okay? So that is my speech. I'm out here speechifying. That is my speech for today. I really appreciate you guys for listening. I'm going to leave my contact information in the description box if you just want to discuss this further. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have not already subscribed, please do. Thanks. Peace.